Hey runners, how's it going? Here we are. I've got about 3 more weeks of training before my Boston Qualifier marathon, and right now we're at the long run, really long run phase. Last Saturday was scheduled our 20 miler, so went out and did that. Ended up running 22 miles. It wasn't fun. I I was cruising along okay, but I didn't feel good most of the time. And late in the run, my lower back started to hurt a little bit. I don't know if you've run into that before. For me, that's pretty common when I'm running a long distance. It's probably just an overall strength issue, but I got it done, and I felt pretty good afterwards. I wasn't terribly beat or sore the following day. That's always a good sign. And with 3 more weeks of training, this coming Saturday, I've got an actual 25K trail race that I'm going to do. And then the following week, another 22 miler. And then the last week of training will just be probably an easy 8 mile run or something like that a week before I do the actual marathon. So that's what's coming up. But today I want to talk about how to use marathon training for your ultra races. I'm hopping into our local ultra race here this Saturday, the 25K. It's a 50 miler and a 25K. I'm just going to do the short option. This race that my local club has been doing for the last 20 years, I was the race director, for half of this race. I just retired from race directing a couple of years ago. And honestly, I've never run the 25K. So this will actually be the first time doing that. And it's a good time on your feet, good effort that fits in with marathon training. It'll probably be around 3 hour effort with a lot of elevation. So it'll be good for my marathon training. But see, back 20 years ago, I was a marathoner, and then I had my first heart attack, and I got into trail running and ultra racing. And I went whole hog into trail running and ultra racing up in the mountains. So every weekend I was running in our local trails in the hills here for training and not doing long road runs. I do short road runs during the week, but most of the time I was trying to get up in the trails as much as possible. And in my 50s and early 60s, I'd still throw in a marathon every now and then, just because we have a local one here, and I've just always done it. So I'd hop in and do it. I wouldn't necessarily train for it because of the ultra racing I was doing, but it always seemed to work out okay. I wasn't running particularly fast in the marathon anyway, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I switched things over a little bit, and for the last few years, I've been doing most of my base training on roads and not so much up on the trails. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, it's just convenient. I can just go out my door and go do a longer run and come back, and I'm home. But the other thing, unfortunately, the ultra races that I normally do have a lot of uphills and a lot of climbs. And when I was younger, I was running most everything that I could. And then as I got older, it ended up I was hiking most of those climbs. And what I noticed if you're doing a 50 miler, a 100K or a 100-mile ultra run, I would end up hiking up the uphills, cruising down the downhills. I've always been a very comfortable downhill runner, so I just never had problems with that. But where I mostly struggled were on the flatter, runnable sections later on in the race. And And that's where I felt that marathon style training would really help me, because it's a way to keep pushing that pace when you're on a relatively flat course for an extended period of time, and build up that that kind of base steady speed that you can maintain even after you get tired, which when you're doing an ultra, it's slower than your marathon pace, but it's a lot better than doing the old ultra shuffle near the end of the race even when you're on level ground. I actually ended up doing an experiment about 4 years ago where I had a very hilly 50 miler race coming up called the White River 50 miler. I've done it quite a few times, so I'm very familiar with it. And I did absolutely no trail running for training for that race, except for every Thursday night, we have a local trail run with our trail running club in a local park. And it's a pretty technical course with some hills. It's about 4 miles that we do. And I always do that. I get in that training for uneven ground and technical stuff and short hill climbs. But for that race, I did, other than those weekly runs in the park, all I did was basically a standard marathon training. And I was doing 18-mile long runs as my weekend long run in the few weeks just before the race. And just 1 week before the race, I went up to our local mountains here and basically ran up to the peak and back just to get into the trail running mode on a bigger scale before I did the race. And I went out and did the race and I felt good. I did about the same as I normally would. I had the strength to hike all the hills, and I had the technique to be able to go down the downhills efficiently. So the marathon training just helped me on all that stuff in between to just keep going on the flats. And particularly on that race, the last 6 miles is basically just a slight roly-poly flat finish, which is a killer when you're tired. So that I felt the marathon training actually worked real well for that. So for you, just something to think about. If you're comfortable doing long runs on the road, 16, 18, 20 milers on the road, I think it's really good training for doing ultra marathons, whether it's a 50K, 50 miler, 100 miler, or whatever. I think it's quality time on the feet where you're moving at a steady pace for all that time. And from my experience, I think that's been helpful for ultra racing. Now, if you're just starting out, I think you have to spend more time working on going up long uphills and long downhills and getting used to the technical footing along with that, because that's a huge part of most of the ultra marathons, is being able to get up and down those hills. But after you feel pretty comfortable with that, I think this marathon style training, even if it's an ultra race, will serve you well. So, give it a shot. And if you already do that, let me know how that does for you. And then next week, I'll report out on how I did on my 25K trail race here, and we're getting down close time for race time, so we'll start talking a little bit more specifically about pre-race preparation in the next couple videos. So see you next week.